Genie Builder is an extension for the VS Code editor. You can install it right from the VS Code Marketplace by going to the Extensions tab, searching for Genie Builder, and then from the extension page clicking on the Install button. After installation, if you go to the Explorer tab, you will find a new pane called Genie. This is where you will manage the apps created with Genie Builder. You can create new apps, load existing apps from your file system, and then manage them from this list view. As you can see, I already have 2 apps loaded and running on my machine, and here in the workspace we can also see the folders for each one of the applications containing their files. So now let's take a look at the kind of apps you can create with Genie. For instance, let's first look at this series forecast app, and we can preview it by right-clicking on this Get button and choosing Open in Internet Browser. This will open the app in a new browser window, and what we have here is a dashboard for predicting weather measurements like temperature or pressure over a time horizon. What we have done is train a neural differential equation on some training data so that if I select a prediction step size and then move this slider in order to adjust the prediction horizon, we obtain the prediction from the neural network for that horizon here in this black line. Moreover, we also have this animate button that when clicked on will run the prediction step by step and give us a nice animation. And so let's now take a look at the second tab, that would be the soil measurements app that we can preview right in the VS Code window by clicking on this monitor icon. What we have here is a dashboard for browsing a large dataset of soil measurements taken by weather stations across the United States, and in this first chart we are displaying several metrics like the surface pressure and temperature as measured by one of the stations over a time period. And then to the right we have control columns with controls that lets us do things like select the new stations according to its area code, also add new metrics to the chart and remove them, and then also adjust the resolution of each one of the lines on the chart. Besides this line chart, we also have this map chart that displays one of the metrics across all of the weather stations on a specific day. We can change the day that's displayed by clicking on this date picker, and as well choose a new metric to draw on top of the map with this select menu. Now, besides these controls on this right column, there's also interactivity for the charts, so that if I click on one of the dots on the map corresponding to station, we can see that the line chart on top is going to display the measurements from that station, and likewise if I click on one of the lines here in the top chart, that will display that metric on that specific day for all of the stations on the map. And so with this we have seen two first examples of Genie apps, and we will use this soil measurements app to give you an introduction to Genie Builder. Now, the workflow for creating a Genie app is as follows. You usually start with some data analysis code with some data that you already have, and you want to create a user interface around. So you bring those into Genie Builder and start creating your web interface with the tool. So in this case, what we have is this soil measurements application folder where we have dropped our data in this data folder. As you can see, some large data files, and we have also dropped some pre-existing routines, some functions here in this lib folder. This is an important folder because anything that you drop in here will be automatically loaded in your app and made available for you to use to implement the logic. And so this will be our starting point for our app, whatever we have here in this data and lib folders, and we would create our Genie app with just 2 files. One of them, this app.gl.html file, which implements the user interface. We don't edit this one manually, we do it with the visual editor. And then we have this app.gl file, which implements the logic of the app. Okay. This is the bridge between the user interface and our pre-existing code, so that it is the entry point to the app and implements all of the routines to handle interaction from the browser. And so the workflow would be to bring your data, files, models, anything into Genie Builder, set an initial skeleton for this app.gl file to load your models or data or anything, and then create the user interface using the visual editor. So let's see how to do that by launching the editor. We can do so by clicking here on this eye icon next to the view file, and this will open the visual editor in the new tab, and we can see here in the middle the canvas, which is where we would implement the interface. Of course, this is already built because the app is already finished, as I showed you earlier. But yeah, this already has all of the components dropped onto it. And then to the right, we will have several panels. The main of them is this library panel, this library tab, that displays the available components that you have to build your interfaces. We have things like layout components with rows and columns, text elements, as well as other components to arrange the content of your pages, interactive components like selectors, sliders, buttons, tables as well, a long list of charts to pick from, and other useful components like the uploader. Okay, so now let's see how we actually build UIs with Genie Builder. Let's say we want to add a new component. We could, for instance, add this selector for picking the station. Recall that this is the control that allows us to select a new weather station, and this will also update the data that's on the charts. So let's say we want to add this control, so let me remove it first. And how would we do this? First, we need to search for it in the library. So I would search for select and drop it onto the canvas. As you can see, I can drop it precisely anywhere I want, so I could put it back right where it was. And then if I select it on the canvas, once it's been dropped, here I have visible the properties panel for this component. It has some predefined, let's say, initial available properties, like the label that we can set to station, for instance, and then these options and data binding fields that I will explain shortly. Besides, there's other suggested properties that I can easily add and remove, and an even longer list of properties to pick from that can be opened by clicking on this Add Property button. And as you can see, there's plenty to configure for every component on the UI. So these interactive components are actually, well, they hold data. So what we need in order to make them work is to declare state variables for each one of them. In this case, for the selector, we will need two variables. One of them to hold the list of possible choices when the menu drops down, and then another variable to hold the value that the user selects. Okay, and we do this in this case. We will need to declare these two variables, and then for the other elements, we will need to do the same after we drop them on the canvas. So let's do this for the selector. To define these variables, we need to go back into the app.jl file. And here in this block delimited by the app macro is where we implement what we call the reactive code. That is the code to handle the reactivity of the application. For this selector, we have declared these two variables. The first of them is this variable that is tagged with the out macro, indicating that we are pushing data from the backend to the browser. Okay, that is this variable is only readable in the browser, cannot be modified, can only be modified from the Julia side. So we push this vector that contains the list of area codes, and then we also define this variable that's tagged with in macro that will be an input variable that can be modified in the browser and in the Julia part. So we declare this variable as an integer that will hold the value that's selected in the menu. Okay, so now we have these two state variables, one for the list and this other input variable for the selected value. We can also define what we call reactive handlers in order to enable interactivity for the app. In this case, what we need to do is anytime we select a new value, we want to update the line charts. So what we do is declare a series of handlers that are implemented with this onChange macro that will watch any of these reactive variables, a list of reactive variables, and whenever their value changes, whenever the user performs an action, it will run this snippet of code, which in this case is just updating the data that's on the plots. Okay, so with these two state variables and this handler, we implement all sorts of interactivity in our applications. This is specific to the selector, but we would do the same for all of the other components. Okay, now that we have declared this variable, so we can go back to the visual editor and bind the variables to the component. To do this, as you can see here in this options field, we could also type in the options manually. Okay, but in this case, we choose to bind it to a variable by clicking on this lightning icon and selecting the FIPS vector. And likewise, for the data binding, we select the selected FIPS variable that we declared earlier. And as you can see, this value is already showing up because this is what you see is what you get editor. So it's already showing the data that we initialize the variables for too. And yeah, this is it for for the select menu, we will do the same for all of the others. You can see this are select menu, options, slider again, and this has its own data binding and so on. And besides these controls, what we have is a series of charts. Now, in Genie Builder, there is a comprehensive chart editor that is open whenever we select the chart on the canvas. Here to the right, we can see the properties for this chart, and we can see its traces that are displayed on top of it. For each one of the traces, we can bind the X and Y axis to some data. In this case, we're binding it to columns from a data frame that we can select from. This could also be a vector. And so we do this for each one of the traces, set its properties, and bind it to the corresponding data. Then likewise for the map chart, we do the same, but in this case the fields would be different. Instead of X and Y axis, we would be binding to the latitude and longitude fields. And likewise for any other kind of chart, the menu would adapt to its necessary fields. And so this would be how you build interfaces with the visual editor. So you drag components into the canvas, declare their variables in the backend, and then come back here and bind them to the corresponding component. Now, while you are doing the bindings, if you need to recall what a specific variable does or where it was defined, you can just click on it here in this menu to the left, and it will take you right to its definition. You can also go to the bindings pane, where if you hover over one of the variables, you can see their type and also the element they are bound to on the canvas. And you can also drop them onto the canvas, and you will see a list of suggested components to add to it. And so this is it for building the interface. Now it will come, the next step would be to style it a bit. You have two options. The first of them would be the theme editor. You can open it by clicking here on this theme tab. And here we can switch between different types themes by clicking on this lines icon. And by default, we have, in this case, we have picked the dark one. Then there's the light theme, that would be the default one. And you can also customize it to your liking by opening the customization menu, and here you can change things like the colors, for instance. Maybe let's make it a little green, or and the background colors as well of your app. And there's also things like texts, fonts, and so on. And once you are satisfied with your changes, you can save them, and this will create a new theme file right here in this public folder. Will be a theme CSS that you can then copy over to our apps in order to have a consistent styling across your applications. And so this will be our first option. In this case, I'm going to discard these changes and go back to the dark theme. And the next option would be to go to the styles pane. Here you can change any style property of the elements on the canvas. You just need to select an element on the canvas, and you can see here its CSS styling properties. You can change anything like dimension, typography, add decorations like borders, and so on. So let me show you how you can style something. Maybe here this column, let's make it a little bit thinner or wider. So we can go to the dimension, and as you can see here, I can change its width, and I get feedback in real time about what it would look like once I'm done. And besides these style items here, there's also the classes list here that lists the CSS classes that are being applied to each one of the elements. Each class is applying a list of predefined styles. So if you want to define your own classes in the CSS file, it is also possible. Then you can just add them via this menu. And with this, we have covered the main features of Genie Builder. This will be the most useful, the most used panels, like the library and the styles and theme, as well as the app.gl code. And then we also have more tabs, like for instance the layers, that let you see a tree view of your app. Okay, so that you can hide parts of it in case you would like to do so, and you can also move things around and expand it further in order to see what's inside of some more complex elements, like for instance this date picker. That's actually a text field with a date picker inside of it. So this comes in handy when you want to go further inside of of a component. And last, we also have this code panel here that lets you select any element on the canvas and edit its code manually in case you want to add some properties, so you don't have to go into the HTML code. And finally, the last feature that I want to show for Genie Builder would be the included AI assistant. With this AI assistant, you can edit the code of the user interface without having to manually do it. So you can just ask it to make changes for you. So for instance, let me show you what this would look like. You can use it to make styling changes. Maybe you don't know exactly which property needs to be tweaked, or how to do things like centering something or adding some borders or something. So you can ask the AI editor to make it for you, or you can also add new components. So let me ask it, for instance, to replace the slider with a knob. And if I click Ask AI, this will send the code for the selected component to the LLM API. And as you can see, after a moment, we can preview the changes that the LLM has proposed. We can either revert them or keep them. In this case, I'm going to keep them. And it has replaced the slider with this knob. And yes, it's been already configured, as you can see here, bound to its corresponding variable, and kept everything from the previous slider. And so we have reached the end of this initial introduction to Genie Builder. I hope it's been useful for you, and I hope you have a great time using this tool to create many web applications.